Good morning, everyone. This is John for MTG Nexus doing another Boros Burn video here in Modern. As a friendly reminder, if you like what you're seeing on the channel, please consider subscribing, giving us a thumbs up, and leaving a constructive comment down below. So here we're working on basically the same list that we played in the last video. Not a whole lot of flexibility currently, I don't think, with the way the meta has kind of shaped out. I do think I'm packing at least one too many pieces of Graveyard Hate, but there really isn't a card that I could think of. Maybe I should run another Core Firewalker, maybe I should be running another Smash Effect, another anti-life gain thing or two. There wasn't a whole lot with this list that I wanted to change up in terms of sideboard slots. Like literally every time I cut Graveyard Hate, I run into like Dredge or Crabvine, which is kind of random because in the meta they don't seem to be doing very well, other than when Sodek manages to win modern challenges with Dredge. But beyond that, nothing too fancy here with the burn, especially with the sideboard. Just a little bit too much loaded up on Graveyard Hate right now, I think. Beyond that, we're still running the 20 lands, the 6 canopy lands. I'm deliberately running on the high end of that to mitigate flooding. But it has come up in some of our leagues and games where I do lose because I'm tapping canopy lands too much, so maybe I should scale that back to 5 of them. Beyond that, only 1 Skullcrack in the main, 3 copies of Searing Blaze. Other than that, pretty much everything else is a 4 of. Blaze is not in a particularly good spot right now. Even with the banning of Once Upon a Time, I don't think tribal decks and such are in a very particularly good position right now. Have not seen many humans, have not seen much merfolk, haven't seen, any of those kind of decks, elves, etc. The closest you get really to a tribal or a creature deck is the basically the Abzan Heliod combo decks, which we're already decent against, although they do have some tools to beat us with Heliod and some other things. So, have not felt the need for additional Blaze effects, the fourth Searing Blaze, Searing Bloods, etc. Feels like those are kind of on the downtick, which is kind of a shame because that's like one of Burn's bread and butter things, is having pretty decent tribal matchups other than humans typically, just because of the way humans lines up against Burn, especially in Game 2 and Game 3 with multiple copies of Oryak Champion, being able to copy those. But last league was really weird in terms of like how the games played out. There was some like mulligan decisions, there was some getting locked out in Game 3 by a couple copies of Spreading Seas by our merfolk opponent. So I'm going to run back the same list, see how we get a better feel for it after some more games. Maybe a little bit better decision making on my part and a little bit better luck with top decking and such, and see how this list does. Once again, I do feel like this is not quite the optimum list yet. There's a few too many Graveyard Hate pieces on the sideboard, but I'm just not quite sure what I wish to replace with them next. So let's get into some matches. Yeah, we're back for match number 1. We're on the draw, unfortunately. This hand's a little it's kind of on the borderline side here. This is a keep, but 3 lands, no creatures, and Searing Blaze potentially a dead card, but we do have a play on 1. Pretty good mana. Our opponent's mulliganing to 5, so my guess is Tron or Dredge usually is when I think of. It could be something like Neobrand. So, once again, this is Modern. You have to be aggressive with your mulligans. Our hand in the dark is fine. Okay, now we're up against Amulet. Alright. Cool. Alright, that's a pretty good draw. I'll play out Sacred Founder here since we're going to be playing the spells anyway. Hopefully we don't hand them a land. Of course, we hand them like one of the worst lands in their deck for us to see. If they didn't already have a bounce land. Could hold up mana for their stupid random creatures, but the feeling if they had something anyway, we're just going to get obliterated. Okay, there's a Zusa. So they can Titan us this turn? Yep, they can Titan us this turn. Mull to 5, casual Titan on turn 3. Cool. Yep, everything's fine here. So basically they can go and get Radiant Fountain, gain enough life that we're no threat to them, and we have a little matter of having to deal with a 6/6. So stupid. Alright, we want the Path to Exiles, want the Skull Cracks. A lot of people aren't thrilled with bringing in Path to Exile in this matchup. I'm personally not a huge fan of it myself, but sometimes you do need to clear a Titan, an Obstinate Baloth, now a Dryad of Elysian Groves, those kind of cards out of the way just to be able to deal enough damage to kill them with your creatures if they haven't already kind of taken over the game at that point. Boros Charm, believe it or not, is one of our worst cards in this matchup. This is basically about the board. It seems like we should be killing them as fast as possible, and we definitely should be. But the board is where they went. Azusa, Dryad of the Elysian Groves, those kind of things. Setting up to get to their Titans. Smash, they specifically usually have to have Amulet for Smash to be good. And, so cut one. Skewer the Critics. Yeah, let's cut Skewer the Critics. So, like, they're not going to leave Engineered Explosives in play generally. Hand's too slow in the matchup. 4 lands, got them all in that. Alright, there's a hand that can do it. This hand's pretty reasonable. Get rid of that. One of the Eidolons. So they kept 7, which means we're probably guaranteed dead if they basically killed us on 5 as it was. So, of course they have a Scout on 1. Engineer Explosives on 1, okay. They kept a controlling hand, which is interesting. Impact of Negation, which is important to note, but the only reason you leave Impact of Negation literally is for deflecting Palm. Otherwise, it's not particularly good in the matchup. Okay, so they're not bothering to leave up EE here, which I find interesting. Our deck is handing us nothing here, basically. Yep, Radiant Fountain. Definitely see why they kept this hand. Dryad, yep. At this point, we just leave Eidolon in play and hope they have to cast spells. That's stuff. Alright. Amulet typing. Whooping Burn since 2014, or however long it's been since they had Summer Bloom. Anyways, on to the next batch. Back for match number 2. This hand is very similar to our game number 1 hand against Amulet Titan. It's definitely a keep, but certainly Burn hands have a lot harder time getting there without creatures. So, we have Rift Bolt, we have interaction, we definitely... Oh, dear lord. Okie dokie. So, we just got dumpstered by amulets, and now we're facing one of our other bad masters. Okay. So anyways, the reason I mulliganed that game 2 hand against against Amulet was simply the fact that hopefully I don't have to land here. Expedition map isn't great, but if they spend their turn just doing that, I think we're okay. Never mind. Welcome to Modern, where you can be owned for keeping decent hands and still get destroyed. But anyways, back to the hand. So, the hand that I mulliganed to get to 5 in the and we could have had worse draws here, I suppose. Do the thing. It's costing us a card, but it's drawing us a card. The card is a land. It's basically got Tron lined up for next turn. And Karn the Great Creator, sure. Getting down to get who knows what out of the sideboard. Sure, we can beat that. Alright, so realistically, opponent cracks this. See with these, grabs the final Tron piece, plays Wormcoil Engine, and put them to 8. Put them to 8. Need to draw Charm. And then we don't have the mana to cast it. So if I had skewered the critics their face, they'd be at 8 going to 5. With a Thought-Knot Seer in play attacking us. But then we'd have more draws as potential ways to win the game. Maybe it was incorrect to kill the Thought-Knot here with their hand having so many cards still in hand. Maybe we were supposed to go face to just try to kill them, as opposed to trying to control the board for another turn or two. I think we're at the point where our creatures weren't going to do anything anyway. So here comes Wormcoil Engine. Sure. Getting like a Pithing Needle. Basilisk Color. Sure. Alright. Off to a very inauspicious start for us. So we want the Skullcracks against the primarily artifact, well, against their artifact package, which includes Chalice and such. Definitely want the Skullcracks to prevent any type of life gain. Path to Exile, pretty reasonable, especially against their big dumb idiots. Searing Blaze, although we were able to leverage it here, is not particularly good in the matchup. It only kills Matter Reshaper or a small Walking Ballista. Then Eidolon of the Great Revel, you could argue you're supposed to keep it on the play. However, there's a lot of cards in their deck that they're draws that are going to beat us outside of specifically their Chalice on 1, Chalice on 2 draws. Generally are going to mainly ignore Eidolon, and it's going to be a liability on our end. It might hit for 4 or 6 damage if they're on a slow draw, but 3, 7. So, okay, let's presume ideal draws. 3, 7. 3, 7, 16, 3, 7, 13, 16 damage in hand. They don't generally deal damage to themselves. They could have a Chalice draw. This hand's good, but it doesn't pressure them with 1-drop, so I think I'm supposed to mulligan this hand. This hand is infinitely vulnerable to Chalice, but I think is better. So we have early pressure and a bunch of bolts, so we at least get to empty most of our hand before we... So... Sure. That could be too cute. Like, because then we lock out if we get hit by, yeah. There's a lot of things this Smash to Smithereens is better on if they, it looks like they're just going to be on the Tron plan, so. A lot of it comes down to what do they play with their hand. Okay, let's see what they do first. Chalice on 1, Mind Stone I don't care about. This is 6 mana, Matter Reshaper, sure. Yep. So we're putting them to 4 here. Okay. Access to 7 mana still. Thought not Seer or Chalice on too. Smash that. And I can Chalice us on 1. Alright. So as I was talking about, the reason we couldn't keep the hand we couldn't keep in Game 2 against Amulet Titan, and the hand we couldn't keep against Game 2 here against Eldrazi Tron, very similar reasons. You have to understand how quickly you have to kill your opponent and how you have to do it. For instance, a deck against like blue-white control. Do I want creatures in my opening hand? Yes. Can I beat blue-white control just by playing a long game of Drago and eventually powering through their counter spells and unloading a hand of burn over a couple of turns? Yes. Can I do that against Amulet Titan if they have their good draws? No. Can I do that against Eldrazi Tron if they're keeping respectable hands? No. I have to get on the board early, pressure them, finish them off with burn spells like we just did. The game we saw in Game 2 against Amulet just didn't have any early pressure. We mulliganed to 5. We had a reasonable early pressure hand, but they had engineered explosives. They had a decent Amulet draw, and quite frankly, not a good matchup for us. This one, very similar. I think our matchup against Amulet Titan, at least good Amulet Titan players, may have gotten worse than our Eldrazi Tron matchup. Which, deck we can beat, but generally we're a dog, especially when they know what they're up against. So, like here we can hope they mulligan to Oblivion and whatnot, but okay, so they're probably on a Tron hand. Gonna fetch a white source here, that way they can't randomly ghost quarter us off of our white sources, which are kind of important depending on if they're on Chalice draw or not. Not Seer is kind of rough. That said, if they're just on the do-nothing draw here, might be debating here if they're supposed to Chalice us or if they're supposed to do the thing. So they're going to Chalice us. Genuinely is pretty bad for us. Especially if they can then turn around and guess they'll be able to Chalice us on 3 next turn. The rest of our hand, they can Thought Not Seer all day long. Yep. Okay, Blessed on 1, sure. So we're putting them to 10, basically to 8. Not going to crack the Sunbay Canyon until after they thought not seer us next turn. Even then, I think we're in a rough spot. Got to draw really well from here. Life total could also become an issue if they have Reality Smashers here. Get right ahead. My entire hand's uncastable. Yep. Like our perfect draw would be like smash into path. Instead, we're just dead. Jump block for a turn, put us to 10. Even if we draw a Boros Charm, we're not going to win the game. Yeah, like we can jump block. Go to 10, and there's no 2 draws in our deck to get us out of this. Especially when it's a land. Alright. Not the best beginning. On to the next match. Hey, we're back for batch number 3. We're on the play this time, which is a good place to be. This is one of those hands that, if we obviously draw a second land, it's great, but it's kind of hard to turn down double Goblin Guide on the play, even with only a 1-lander, so I think I'm inclined to keep this hand. Once again, when you're evaluating whether to keep a 1-land hand, risk-reward, you have 3 spells you can play easily, another 2 we could cast as long as there's a Goblin Guide in play dealing chunks of damage, so this hand has a high upside, downside of being choked on mana. Really? Want to get all the 1 damage spells out of our hand, or not 1 damage, 1 casting cost spells out of our hand, simply because we're up against Eldrazi Tron again. Yep, there's an expedition map. See, this is why I think the Eldrazi Tron matchup might be a little bit better for us than Amulet Titan. Like, what are they going to do here? They're going to cast a Adder Shaper, sure. And if we rip a land, we just get to obliterate them. Like Searing Blaze into... Searing Blaze puts them that puts them to 5, that put them to 1. Sure, they get to Thought Not Seer us, but then they're dead on board. Like I said, that's best case scenario here. Rift Bolt, not bad, but not great. Wow, let's just hand them all the lands here, sure. Really? So they're gonna have Tron next turn? Okay. At least they can't chalice us on 3 and cast Thought Not Seer. Okay. Still have access to 4 mana, 5 mana if it's a Eldrazi spell. Yep, Karn. Okay. So I think we have one turn to rip either a land or a... They must not be as well prepared for the burn matchup. Last one had Basilisk Caller. We got tremendously lucky here to be on the play. And this is a matchup that's very, very play draw dependent. Like our best draws get under their best draws on the play. Their best draws cancel out our best draws on the draw. Once again, very similar. You're bringing in smashes, you're bringing in pass, you're bringing in skull cracks. Searing Blaze, once again, not great in the matchup. Also, I think Searing Blaze is a lot worse in the more recent builds of Burn because we only have like 5 fetch lands, so we can't necessarily trigger it as much, at least on command. We have to be able to do it at sorcery speed, which gets a lot worse at sorcery speed. Once again, kind of debating Eidolon here, but I think especially on the draw, Eidolon has to go out. It's just their best draws. Usually they've played most of their few early mana spells that they care about in the early game. Chalice on 1, Matter Shaper, etc. usually come down before they particularly care about what's going on in our hand or Eidolon. This hand has the tools to get through early, depends on how clunky their draw is. Them keeping 7 generally indicates they have either a quick TKS or a quick Chalice on 1, so we can only guarantee that one of these two will resolve. Best case scenario, we get to go Guide in the Swift Spear, Suspend Riftbolt, and then start chunking them with 2 damage spells. This hand's definitely a keep, but certainly a hand that their deck is capable of beating out of on the draw. So looks like they're on the... They might be on a Tron draw. I'm going to lead off on Basic Mountain here, in case we draw like an Inspiring Vantage here or something and we don't need to shock this in. Generally damaged... I'm getting... Draws a Temple could be problematic. Generally damage matters, but it doesn't matter here, if that makes sense. So, they get to go ham next turn. Okay, they'll have a Karn. Suspend Riftbolt and pass. It's not their turn, so they won't have a Karn because they're fetching it away. They had Tron lined up. That's bad. Why would you fetch a mine? I think they fetched the wrong land. Okay, sure. Chalice on 2. Please don't be Chalice on 2. Of course it's Chalice on 2, because there is no justice in this world. Put them to 1. My entire hand, other than Path to Exile, is kind of pointless then. Alright, stay up Blast Zone, sure. I was gonna say, please let there be justice here. They have. Please don't have. I was gonna say, the way our league is gone, they'll have the counter target sorcery spell in their hand. Alright, 1-1 against Eldrazi now on to match number 4. Yeah, we're back for match number 4. Unfortunately, we are on the draw, but this hand is pretty good. 1 drop into 1 drop, plus a bunch of spells we can cast. Hand's going to be very painful, but it's a solid hand. Okay, so not seeing snow-covered lands, so maybe Storm. Alright, hand just got a whole lot less painful. Cards on the bottom of their library. Oh, they're a version of control, so maybe Blue Moon. It's possible here I should have actually not played out the land and try to bait out the remand here. Looks like they're going to remand anyway, so. Confirmed, most likely Blue Moon. Gonna want to hold this fetch land for when they try to go Snapcaster Mage something. Oh, they're Storm. Okay. So am I dead? Okay. Punished for not holding up Bolt here. So I could have redeployed Goblin Guide here, but it doesn't change the clock. So I'm going to hold a Bolt through this turn cycle so I don't die to another Dork plus stuff. Opponent felt that was their opening. They went for it and failed. So, Storm. Rest in peace. Tormod's Crypts. On the draw, Path to Exile. Not the greatest, hear me out a minute. Board out the Boros Charms, because once again we're dealing with Creech deck. Need to board out 2 more cards. Skullcrack, generally not great in the matchup. They generally don't have a ton of ways to gain life. They're more concerned about avoiding stuff per se. And the Searing Blaze, once again, a lot awkward in the matchup. Especially on the draw, so I think we board out 1. So the reason I bring in Path, especially on the play, is you want to be able to hold up as much one mana interaction as possible to keep from what just happening. Our opponent, saw a hole in our defenses there. They went for it. They failed. So we got a little bit lucky that they went off before they wanted to. This hand, while it has a hate piece, we have 5 lands. Can't keep this hand. Especially in post-board configurations. See, this is the kind of hand that I'm talking about where Path could be a key player. So the reason I'm inclined to keep this hand is, even though we only have 1 mana, we're able to go Path in the Guide into Swiftspear and hold up Path on turn 3, or Guide into hold up Path, but that's not going to get us anywhere. So I think we keep this hand, bottom either the Blaze or the Skewer the Critics, possibly even Lightning Helix. I think we get rid of the Blaze since we're kind of earmarking Path to answer creatures. So, and if we don't happen to draw a second land, at least we can cast these 4 spells. So, this does give away a good bit of information about our hand, that this is likely either our only land or we have another Canopy land. So, that's an Electric Mancer. Alright. However, it looks like they don't have a... Never mind, we're still doing my end step here. Interesting. I think we go with Eerily Pressure. Crypt was a pretty good draw here. Sculpting Turn's going to give them the ability to potentially go off next turn. Alright, see what you can do. Oh, their mana is actually going to come back to bite them here, isn't it? They would have to go like Manamorphose into Electromancer and then try to go off here. And Crypt makes a good bit of their ways to go off awkward. Like, they could just storm out a bunch of goblins and kind of go from there. Brawl. Okay. Sure. Ritual. Past in Flames. There's your graveyard. Grape Shot Killer board, sure. So now their last card in hand is another dude, so pathing this brawl doesn't do a ton here. At least not at the moment. Path this brawl out of the way. Hopefully they haven't drawn Remand. Giving them lands, obviously not great, but it looks like they don't have any more basics to fetch anyway. Put them to 11 here. Alright, so... Show 2. Sure. All right. So, as unlucky and rough as the first 2 matches went, we've gotten a little bit lucky and variance has swung back our way in the last 2 matches. On to the final match. We're back for match number 5. We are on the play. So, as much as I talk about keepable 1-land hands, it's all about context, and this hand is very clunky. Bunch of 3-mana spells, effectively. Riftbolt, obviously, you can cast. Skewer, you can cast after the Swiftspear were to hit. But you'd be counting on a lot right to go with this hand. So, for that reason, it's a mulligan. So, like I said, context is everything with your hand with 1-landers, especially on the play. This hand's a lot better. So, we'd end up cracking the fetch land anyway, so I think we put back the fetch land. Or I guess I could go... So, how do I want to evaluate this hand? So, we're keeping it, obviously. It's a keepable hand. The question becomes, like, what do you put back? Do you put back... Because your hand's either going to go Goblin God Eidolon or Goblin God Blaze. So do I risk keeping a 3rd land just to be able to trigger landfall for Blaze? Or do I keep... put back one of the lands, keep Lava Spike, hope to rip a 3rd land? I think I'm going to put back the fetch land, keep all the spells. So again, some things to consider a little bit, you know, like how do you keep your hand, etc. So, Stomping Grounds, so Searing Blaze might actually be actively bad. Yep, we're up against Ponzo. Alright. Or we're up against the whatchamacallit version of the deck. We might be up against the creature version of the deck. I guess of the moon, sure. Okay. Blaze your dude. Put you to dead unless you have a Baloth. Has conceded the game. This is that Gruul kind of mid-range deck. It's sort of Ponza, but not really. Magus of the Moon. Red-green mid-range. So, this deck obviously got worse with Once Upon a Time being banned. They have a lot of like just mid-range good stuff. So, bring in the Skull Cracks, prevent life gain. Bring in Exquisite Firecrafts to do the thing. And then I don't have enough spells to get all the white spells out of my deck, which is unfortunate, but necessary, I guess. I want to bring in Path. If it's uncastable, it's uncastable. Boros Charm's probably the first cut here, just because it's a white spell, and this is primarily a board-based game. And then so only 8 mana dorks seems a little Clothis. Like, the lists I'm looking at are obviously obsolete because Once Upon a Time was banned. At least it's possible the banning hasn't gone into effect yet. So do the thing, check the thing. Let's get rid of a couple copies of, or 3 copies of Lightning Helix here. Yes, it can target creatures, but it's also a liability in terms of Blood Moon effects. So we only have 3 white cards in our deck, so if they bring in Blood Moon-esque effects, they're not good. This hand isn't good. We have only 1 land, no early pressure other than Eidolon, which requires us to rip a land. And I mean, this hand would be good if we had a second land, but it's just not. Seems a little bit more defensible about keeping. Double Searing Blaze is a hecka awkward. Eidolon on the draw might be too slow. So let's presume, best case scenario, we rip a land. I think I'm going to want to not play Eidolon on 2. I'm probably going to want to play to the board. So I think Eidolon is the card to go back here. Could argue for a second sock copy of Searing Blaze or Skullcrack, but I think we're going to want to play to the board. So, alright. So I'm leading on this land first because I don't want, or I want to be able to hold off using my Searing Blazes to kill their creatures, because that's kind of our way to leverage winning here. It's a nice stomping ground. Okay, they kept a really slow hand. Okay, so do the thing. So I could fire off like 1 bolt here. What could they play on 3 that would punish us for bolting here? Beginning of your pre-combat main phase. Okay, land card, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So... should have obviously unloaded my hand last turn. They kept a really slow and clunky hand. I don't know if we're going to be able to actually punish them for it. They're going to... I'm not dead here, so... they could be at 2 lower if I had just gone for the bolt play. Skull crack you, hope for the best. They had a bolt the entire time. Okay. Or they just drew the bolt, whichever. Makes this that much more difficult for us to win the game. Unlikely this Eidolon's going to matter. I'm going to get to continue to nug us with Clothis here. Choose not to cast it. So we got a 7 here, 6, actually down to 4. Can put them to 3, back to 5. We're just supposed to go for it here. It's possible they have another play lined up we're giving the mana for, but down to 3, back to 5. Yep. Glory banger, and then we're dead. Okay, I kept too slow of it, or I didn't keep too slow of a hand. I played too conservative a game plan there. I think we should have won that game if I wasn't being too overly conservative. Still think I like the way I sideboarded here. Once again, they may not have Blood Moon in their deck at this point. 4 lands. Can I keep this? Okay, I guess it's only a 3-lander. Never mind. This hand's a snap keep. No debate. 1 drop into a bunch of skull cracks. Doesn't get much better in this matchup. Herber Elf. Yep, the elf has to die. Don't want to accelerate them. Their elf is moderately problematic. Okay. Put in on a bolt here. Of course, they have bolt. Okay. Alright. Still in really rough shape here. Clean that out. Opponent's going to 9 here. We can only put them to 6 currently. Okay. Let them attack here. I think I go ahead and path this guy. Question is, do I fire off Skullcrack here? Don't think so. Put them to 1. 1 is not 0, so continue to hold up mana here. Yeah, Pyromancer, sure, whatever. Skullcrack. Don't play around, weather the storm, because we can't beat it anyway. Alright, Blaze. Give us a land deck. Sweet. They go out on their own terms. That was a heck of a league. I'll be back in 1 second with the wrap-up. So we're back for a short wrap-up with this league with Boros Burn. So as far as the build, still think I have too many graveyard hate spots or hate pieces. But there's not another card in my sideboard that I've really decided that I want to put in there. Like I said, you could add another Core Firewalker for the red matchups. You could add another Path to Exile, another Deflecting Palm, etc. Could add another Searing Effect. Could add the 4th Searing Effect back in the thing. Move the Skullcrack to the sideboard. There's so many little like adjustments you can make, but like it comes down to like the spells that have been identified as good in burn are generally the spells every burn deck is playing. It's more a matter of where do I want my anti-life gain, how many blaze effects do I want, am I doing something so desperate as to run Grim Lavamancer? There's in general, Boros is pretty stock now in what you're running. It's a matter of details, like how many Canopy lands do you want to run at the cost of life? How many blaze effects do you want to run? How many anti-life gain stuff? It's really a matter of trimming numbers, figuring out what you're doing. Like a lot of people don't run Exquisite Firecraft. I happen to like the card. I don't like losing Grixis Death Shadow. I like having a KO card against the blue decks. And you can bring it in sometimes as a 4 damage spell, in certain matchups. You could potentially bring it in against Amulet to kill Dryad against their slower draws. You can bring it in against, any number of decks. I could even brought it in against the Eldrazi decks, potentially. But I think you saw, in this league, what Burn's particularly good at and what Burn's particularly bad at in this meta. Amulet Titan against their good draws, against good players, it's a bad matchup. It's gotten worse with Dryad of Elysian Groves. It was even worse when they had Once Upon a Time. They now have fast draws backed up by bodies we can't deal with Dryad, etc. So, they mulliganed to 5 and easily destroyed us in game number 1. Game number 2, we had a pretty good draw, but they still had, turn 3 Dryad into a bunch of Radiant Fountain triggers and beating us that way. So, I think that matchup's almost a lost cause. There are certainly draws that don't come together, etc. You can win. Eldrazi I think is... I think on the surface, Eldrazi is the better deck in the matchup. I think their powerful draws beat our powerful draws. However, that is play draw dependent. As I mentioned in a couple of the matches with the E-Tron here, when we're on the play, we're highly favored. When they're on the play, they have one of their good draws, they're favored. I think when Once Upon a Time gone, I think the balance swings back more towards Burn, but I still think they're slightly favored in the matchup. It's one of those, when the die roll, you have an advantage in the matchup, and you got to hope your game 1 on the play that you have a good 1-drop draw. 1-drop creature and other spells. Storm, as bad as Amulet is for us, Storm is that good. But Storm is very much not much a part of the meta right now. I think it's a matchup that you can certainly lose, but you put a lot of pressure on your opponent's life total. You force them to try to win the game quicker than they want to, and Eidolon's just kind of the KO card that they have to have an answer for. Gruul midrange, which is basically land destruction less Ponza with a bunch of big creatures, which I think is a fine approach. If I wouldn't have been too conservative, I think we would have basically won that match 3-0. I was playing around, I forget what I was playing around there. Should have gone all in with the Swift Spears and Bolts the previous turns. That way I wasn't holding up mana and spewing damage. One of the tensions with playing Swift Spear in particular is holding up playing the instant speed game. You lose out on the ability to get an extra point of damage for each one of your spells. So that kind of cost us game number 2. And then it's pretty much it so far with this league. The first 2 matches were just whatever could go wrong. And then we got a little bit lucky in match number 3 against E-Tron. Our opponent fetched the wrong land accidentally. And then they almost cheesed us out with Chalice on 2 with a bunch of 2-drop spells in our hand. So, our opponent played well, despite the getting the wrong land. They chaliced us on 2, realizing that our hands probably glutted with 2s at that point. And we got a little bit lucky to rip the Lava Spike. So, Burn's in a weird place in the meta right now. I don't think it's in a good place, but I think it's playable. I think it's a lot worse off than it was 6, 8, 9 months ago, but I don't think it's unplayable. As long as Amulet and E-Tron are 2 of the top decks in the format, generally not great for Burn, but Modern's a rather wide open meta right now, so you're not going to see more than 5%, 10% of a field be those two decks. So Burn still has some places it can win. So, especially if people are more prepared for prowess than they are for burn. Anywho, I've rambled on long enough. Kind of my thoughts on this particular league. As a friendly reminder, if you like what you're seeing on the channel, please consider subscribing, giving us a thumbs up, and leaving a constructive comment down below. And it looks like from the poll that we'll be back later this week with some mono white or white splashing blue Heliod combo in Pioneer, depending on which build trips my fancy. Kind of like the blue version because it plays Dragon Lord Ojutai, which is a card I have an unhealthy obsession with for being an aggro player. But anywho, this has been Sean for MTG Nexus.